Father, I'm but your humble servant. Do with me what you will. Humble my heart so that I can receive you. Restore my soul, make me whole. Make me whole, make me whole. Please restore my soul and make me whole. Here's my heart, here's my soul. Please restore my soul, make me whole. Of the righteous, protect me from all evil. Let your light shine through me before others, and restore my soul, make me whole, make me whole.
With good news for you. And I say it's for you because once you receive it, I really hope you will share it with someone else. And again, it's good news in spite of all the bad that you will hear. So I begin by sharing with you a passage from 1 John 2:16. And it says, "For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the boastful pride of life is not from the Father, but it is from the world." That means that as we continue this topic of sex and sexual trauma, that those things that we're experiencing those things are not what God designed sex to be. And it is God who designed it because he's the one who designed these incredible bodies of ours. And so today I have a guest with us. Her name is Dr. Joy Wassel. Joy has a PhD and is a professional counselor. So Joy, would you please say hello to our listeners, and then we'll get into our dialogue for today, please.
Well, hello, listeners. I look forward to talking with you and sharing some important information with you.
Okay, well, let's hear what it is that you're going to share about as it relates to male sexual trauma.
Before we start out with the topic, I actually have some information I'd like to share with your listeners.
Okay.
And that has to do with rape crisis information, so that if this topic is personal to someone who is listening or someone who knows someone who this is personal to, I'd like them to have the information before we even start discussing the topic.
Okay.
There is a rape hotline in Los Angeles, California, which is in your vicinity. The number there is 626-793-3385. And if you are listening from somewhere outside the Los Angeles area, there is a National Sexual Assault Hotline, and that telephone number is 800-656-4673. These are important numbers, and if by any chance you miss the numbers, you can look them up and go online and look up rape crisis centers. Almost all of the rape crisis centers now are familiar with the topic of the sexual assault and rape of men. In addition, if you need to talk with me personally, I can be, not talk with me, but email me at joywasselphd@gmail.com. That's JOYWASSELPHD@gmail.com. I cannot provide counseling, but I can provide consultation. Okay?
Okay, thank you. So that's Joy dot Wassel.
No, 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 not on the Gmail. It's not. It's
Okay, so Joy Wassel PhD at
dot
gmail
at
dot com.
uh-huh.
Okay,
All
now
right.
this is an
Now,
interesting topic, and I want to know how in the world did you come across this topic and decide that you wanted to delve into male sexual assault?
well, it began in my internship for my doctoral dissertation for my PhD program. My internship was at a state mental hospital in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It has since closed down, but in the process of working there, I worked on 2 male wards and came across some men who had been sexually assaulted or raped. One of the most profound experiences was that I was working in the men's ward, and I had keys to the ward, and I walked in the door one day, and this patient came running up to me and said, "Dr. Joy, Dr. Joy." I wasn't the doctor then, but he thought I was because I had keys. And he said, "A man came in and raped me last night." And then he told me the story about how someone with keys had come into his room in the mental hospital and had sexually assaulted, raped him, anally raped him in his bed at the hospital. And I was frustrated because when I told the supervisors, when I told my supervisor, when I told the staff and the nursing staff, they totally dismissed the man and said that he was just a mental patient and he was making up things. And that started the process where I would begin looking at the records of the different patients that I worked with. And then as I looked into their histories, I saw that many of them had rape histories, and yet this wasn't being discussed in their treatment. Their treatment was on more benign issues. I guess they were afraid of setting them off or whatever. So I would begin to see over and over again that these men had sexual trauma issues, and none of it was being addressed. And that's what first got me interested in the topic. It was like, oh my God, what's going on here? This big issue is in these men's lives, and nobody's talking about it.
Okay, so your focus, if you were to narrow your focus, I know sexual assault is a large area. Were you looking at what? Well, I don't know. Let's narrow it down. Were you looking at what's happened to these people that were assaulted as a child, and then later on how they behaved as an adult, or were you focusing on something else?
No, I specifically did not want to focus on children because one of the things is that within when I was doing my research within the sexual assault research, all of the literature was talking about children that addressed men, and it was kind of like men were victims up to age 12, and then all of a sudden they were somehow ignored, and we assumed that they weren't victims any longer. So I specifically wanted to address the subjects, the men who had been raped and assaulted after the age of 14, which in itself is still pretty young. But the age range in my study was between the age of 14, and the oldest individual that I interviewed was 63 at the time. So I wanted to get the adults.
Oh, okay. Well, just because I'm rather naive on this subject, I'd like to know if the assault as a child impacts those who become adults to the point where they would in turn assault some other child or someone else.
Well, I don't know that that's a question that I can specifically address because I wasn't looking at children who then became perpetrators. Mine was on the adult victim. And I think we need to look at the adult victim because they're the ones that are being ignored. And there are certain myths in our culture that make us ignore the male victim. I think and I'd like to go over this because I think it's an important thing to understand, is that the male victim is ignored in our culture. We have the assumption that it's only women who get raped.
Okay.
Men are the perpetrators. They can't be the victims. And we have it that if men are victims, it's only because they're a child, which is why I didn't want to look at the children that were sexually assaulted, because there is literature on that. We assume that if a man is a victim, there's only three circumstances: if he's a child, if he's gay, or if he's a prisoner. And if he's gay or if he's a prisoner, we assume that, well, he's an outcast in society, therefore he doesn't deserve our attention. And so I wanted to look at those people beyond just the child victim, and I wanted to look at the man who's being ignored and not being understood. And I think one of the other things is that we have the assumption that it's impossible for a man to be raped by a woman, that it's impossible for
Oh,
yes, they
that's
can.
interesting. So keep going.
Okay. And there's always the assumption that if a man has sex with a man or a woman, he wanted it. And if he has any kind of physical arousal, he wanted it. We have this really positive image in our culture. I think some of it is diminishing now with these issues of teachers having sex with their younger students. But we have this whole idea, this mythology in our culture, that if an adult woman introduces a young man to sex, that's somehow a rite of initiation. That's something positive. And yet when we see the reverse, when we see an older man having sex with a younger girl, we don't think it's positive. And it's not for the men either. But because the mythology says it's supposed to be, then they don't feel and understand that they have actually been victimized. I think that we need to look at if the situation were reversed, how would we look at it? And I think the other myths that come into play are the fact that if a man has sex with another man, he's gay. Therefore, he's an outcast. He doesn't need to be given any attention. If a man has sex with another woman, and he doesn't like it, we assume he's gay. It's like there's all of these mythologies around men and sex, and we don't acknowledge their vulnerability.
Well, let me ask you a question about something you just said. You said we assume that a man who has sex with another man is gay. So you're saying he's not?
Well, in the case of sexual assault and rape, no, he's not. If you have a victim and another man comes at him and has sex with him and forces him to have sex, that doesn't mean the victim is gay.
Oh, okay. So victim. Okay, I'm with you now. Okay. Continue.
So these are all things that impact our acceptance and our understanding of a male as a victim of rape. I think that we need to also look at the issue of sexual arousal and orgasm, and this is fairly specific, but I think it's important for us to understand because we have assumptions about male anatomy. And the male anatomy, the assumption is that if a man has an erection or an orgasm, then somehow he wanted what happened to him. And we understand that in our mythology of our culture, that a man's arousal is assumed to be by desire, which is only one way that a man can have an erection. A man can also have an erection if he's operating under fear. If you look at animals in the wild, the super male guy, the super male of the species, can attack the lesser male species, and the lesser male becomes more submissive, rolls over on his back, exposes his stomach, and he'll have an erection. But he's having that erection out of fear, not out of desire. And the research shows, if you look deeply into it, a man can have an erection out of fear. And the other way a man can have an erection, or without his wanting it, is if someone purposefully stimulates him physically to an erection, even though his mind doesn't want it. His body will physiologically respond to it, especially when he's a young man. So there are all these mythologies about arousal that impact our belief in the victimization of a man. And we need to understand this physiology as well as the psychology if we're going to understand men and how they can and can't be raped. So
Okay,
that's
this
an
is rather
important piece of
deep and it's
information.
really interesting. All right, so go
Yeah.
ahead and continue to tell us more about whatever.
Yeah, it gets kind of,
I didn't
but
want to say about
so what
erections, but whatever else comes after that.
happened? So what we need to do is that there are certain statistics on male rape, and we assume it's very infrequent. But if we look back on the history of the feminist movement, they showed that women were assumed to be raped a lot less frequently than they actually were. And the issue is not about lack of incidence and lack of frequency, it is about the lack of reporting. And
Yes.
so a man is has many reasons he's not going to report it. First of all, we have all the myths that keep him from reporting it. We have the lack of understanding about male anatomy and how it responds to stimulation. Men have the same fears, and they're probably heightened that they're not going to be believed if they do report it. They can sometimes have physical threats that keep them from reporting it. And they can also have shame about failing to live up to the expectations of what it is to be a male. And so the
Absolutely.
shame will stop them. And then the
Yes.
other piece, and this is a piece that we kind of walk the line, kind of walk a tightrope in when we talk about religion, because there's so many prohibitions about masturbation. And so men grow up with a lot of shame about masturbation and then don't want it known that they have to do this practice. And I've had men in the study who actually continue to be sexually assaulted and blackmailed by the threat that their parents, these were young, not, mid-adolescent, older adolescents, they were so frightened of their parents being told they were caught masturbating that they actually continued to allow themselves to be assaulted because the shame of having that known to their parents was so abhorrent to them. So we need to really look at what happens in the physiology of sex and the practices of sex.
Okay, that was there's something going on with our connection here, and I pray that it continues to function well for us because I want everything you share to be very clearly heard so that we can learn from your research. Okay,
You
so
got it.
all
You,
right, so go ahead.
okay, so in my research, there were about 30 men, ranging in age from 14 to 63. Uh, in most cases, it looks like the dominant perpetrator was male. Did you have something? The dominant, males were more likely to be the perpetrators in my research, but we can't take that as gospel because we don't know if that's a characteristic of the research or of the underreporting. Because men who are raped by women often don't even recognize that it was rape because of their own confusion about their physiological responses. So, in the sexual assaults, the rapes by women of men in my study, I had a date rape situation where a young man was dating an older woman who was sexually assaulting him and forcing him to have sex, and he felt that he couldn't, if he didn't have sex with her, he wasn't a man. If if he objected, he felt like he couldn't force her to stop, that it was like assault against her, and so he allowed himself to be assaulted. So that is an instance of date rape. I had a situation of gang rape where several young people, the young man who was in his mid-adolescence at the time, and several other younger people going from about, I think he was about 16, younger people were involved in this group that went down to age 12. There were boys and girls in the group, and they were being kind of babysat by these three older adolescents, either 18 or 19. The three older adolescents assaulted this young man, tied him down in a barn, masturbated him to ejaculation in front of everybody. He was humiliated. And then on another occasion, he was actually tied down, masturbated to erection, and then, sadly, a 12-year-old girl was forced down on him. And so he was simultaneously a victim of rape and a perpetrator of rape involuntarily at the same time.
Oh wow.
So these are the kinds of things that happen that nobody wants to talk about, nobody wants to listen to. I had an employer rape, a woman a man was, I think he was in his early 20s, had a job. His female employer invited him to a meeting after hours, locked the door behind him, and asked him how he liked his job. Implication being he could lose his job if he didn't cooperate, and he was forced to perform oral sex on her. I think that there were a couple cases of acquaintance rape where a young man was about, again, mid-adolescence. He and his buddies were having a camp out in one of the buddies' homes, and each of them had their own individual tent. And in the middle of the night, the older sister of the host young man came into the tent with this man and had sex with him. And he was so afraid that if he cried out, that his friends would make fun of him and laugh at him because he didn't want sex with a woman. He was so afraid that he'd be accused of being gay that he had his first sexual experience with this young woman without wanting to have it. And his body, of course, was responsive because he was, mid-adolescent at the time. And so his first sexual experience was totally unwanted, and he felt it bothered him it interfered with his normal growth as a man, having and dating women and having sexual experiences. So there was a construction worker who went to a construction site out of state, was staying in a motel, went to the bar, met some women. He got drunk. The women followed him into his room and had sex with him against his will. So we have to really take a look at our misinterpretations and our misunderstandings about the fact that we think women can't rape men and the fact that we think that men can't be victims of rape.
Well,
Go ahead.
you know what? You just shared something that makes me understand how Lot's daughters got drunk. They got him drunk, and they had sex with their father, one night and one the next night, and both of them conceived and had children. So I was saying, didn't the father know anything about what was going on? So by them getting him drunk, his body just responded, so he didn't even have to participate in it.
Right, exactly. And I think that's an important insight, that we see that we tend to look at our prejudices, and in most cases we'll accuse the man. Well, we do this with women too. We accuse them of being at fault when they're raped, and we accuse men of being at fault when they're raped. And we need to look at just what are the circumstances that happen. And if someone is incapacitated, no one else has the right to override their body and use it for their own gratification without the consent of the person whose body it is. So we need to look at all that. I think that the instances of male perpetrators, just every kind of rape that we know about women, we know about, that happened to women, happened to men. And there's stranger rape. One man was visiting his mother in the hospital while she was deathly ill. He wanted to get away. He went out to a park to have his lunch, and the park was next to some woods, and two men came and accosted him, carried him into the woods, and raped him while he was visiting his mother at a hospital. Oh, wow. So it happens all times of day and night. It's not just a nighttime thing. It's not just, all of the things that we assume don't happen do happen when we start to look at this information.
I'm glad you said that, because what I have a video clip. I know we're not talking about children, but I want people to see this video clip. It's short, but then we want to come back and talk about this. But I want you to think about this. If you ever counseled the perpetrator, okay? So just think about that for a moment. Could we see this video clip, please?
At least, I thought I did. Then, something weird happened to me. It's hard to talk about, but, well, here it goes. See, my mom works, so Mom used to pay Mrs. McGregor. It was a neat place because Mrs. McGregor always had treats and stuff for us kids, and sometimes Mr. McGregor would come home early. We all liked him. We called him Mr. Mac, and sometimes he'd pick one special boy and take him out to his workshop.
I've got a special job for you today.
Won't that be fun?
He'd take me to his workshop in the garage and teach me woodworking. sawing, hammering, and stuff. I like getting work from the other kids, you know. And Mr. Mack called me his #1 helper.
Slow and steady. That's the way, Jake.
I'd work hard and get hot. Sometimes I'd take my shirt off.
Let's take your shirt off.
Mr. Mack said, that's what a man does when he's working hard.
Yeah, we'll get you cleaned up. That's better.
One day I was painting this birdhouse I helped build.
Yep, that's really shaping up.
Thanks.
Here, let me help. Now, you missed a spot right up there.
Oh, no! Mr. McGregor spilled paint on me. I mean, really spilled paint all over me and my clothes.
Just take off your clothes. Go on, take them off. I'll help you clean up.
So I did. I mean, I had paint all over me, so it made sense. But then something weird happened.
Now, I'm going to take a picture to remember the day we spilled the paint.
I don't really want to.
Oh, it's okay, Jake. All the other boys do it. Look.
He had pictures of all the boys in daycare, and they were all naked. But that wasn't the worst.
There, now I'll help you clean up.
Here's the part that's hard to talk about. Mr. Mack touched my penis, and well, I was so surprised, I didn't know what to do. I mean, it didn't hurt or feel bad, but it made me so confused.
There, that feels good, doesn't it?
It didn't feel good, it felt gross. I always thought I know what to do in a tough spot, but when it was happening, well, I didn't do anything.
Oh my!
I tried to act like nothing happened. What happened to me?
That's all right.
The pictures, the touching, he was wrong. It was not my fault. It's called sexual abuse.
All right. Sexual abuse, sexual trauma. Is there any difference there between the two of them, Joy?
What, between sexual abuse and sexual trauma?
Yes.
I don't see, I think it's about the same thing,
Okay.
you know.
All right. Well, we just saw a young boy being touched by an older man. And when I saw that, the thing that really resonated with me was that here is somebody who's trusted, an older person, and many times people will gravitate towards someone who shows affection towards them and they respect them. And so I would just wondered, what is it that did you find anything in common that the victims had in common other than being male?
Well, I think in every case, the male, you know, obviously they're all male, but the victims are all in some level in a place of vulnerability. They're either in vulnerability because of the power structure, like especially with children, the power structure of an adult and a child is there. But, you know, there's power issues. When I talked about the man in his 20s who was sexually assaulted and forced to have oral sex with his boss, there's a power structure there. So there's the power structure, there's the vulnerability. Often in children, the perpetrator will gravitate toward children who have poor, not poor, but less than ideal home situations where the parents aren't home or where the parents are absent, even though they're physically there, they're not there to support the children. So there's always that, but there's always a level of vulnerability, and surprise itself can be a vulnerable piece of the information here. Because when you're an adult man, when he's told this doesn't happen to him and it's happening, sometimes they can freeze.
Okay.
But there's,
you know what? We're
full
running
force.
out of time, but what I'd like for you to do is make a closing comment to our listeners.
The closing comment I would make is let's pay attention to what's going on, and let's be willing to hear things that run counter to what our beliefs and prejudices are. If we think of those myths, let's look at those myths. And when someone tells us they've been assaulted, let's take our time and listen and pay attention and see what we can do to help.
And I do wish I'd talked to you years ago, but I'm talking to you now, and I pray that no one else has to experience some of the things that we've experienced in this world. So thank you so much, Dr. Joy Wassel, PhD, professional counselor. We appreciate all that you've shared with us today about sex and sexual trauma. And you have a blessed day. And thank you all for listening. And may the good Lord bless you and have a blessed day.
Please restore my soul, make me whole. Here's my heart, here's my soul. Please restore my soul. Teach me how to give the love that Jesus gave to me.